So what I'm going to talk about is pretty broad, but I do think that it does have like implications to how we both create and consume content. And like it's something that's like, again, it's pretty broad. It's something that's always like kind of intrigued me. And like I said, I do think it does have implications in how we consume and produce things. So I'm actually just going to get started, and then I think in a couple of minutes, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So again, now there are two things on the screen, right? So again, like in your mind, I just want you to like think. So one is correct, one is like incorrect, right? So just again, like in your mind, I want you to think which one you think is correct, which one you think is incorrect. And the correct one is actually the one on the right. And I don't know if it was just me, but for the longest time, I thought it was spelled tunes and not tunes. But turns out it's always been Tunes. Another example is, again, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. So again, we all know this. It's Snow White. We've heard it. Our entire childhood, we've heard it. Except that like this line was never said. It was never mirror, mirror on the wall. It was always magic mirror on the wall. So again, that's something that, again, we've always grown up saying mirror, mirror on the wall, but those words were never uttered. Similarly, another one, right? The Monopoly mascot guy, right? Again, which one is it? So is it the one on the left or is it the one on the right? And turns out that it is the one on the right. He actually doesn't wear a monocle, which I think actually like it surprised me.
Pallavi, could you please go on mute?
Sorry.
Yeah. So I always remembered him wearing a monocle, but turns out that he never wore a monocle. And then again, another one is the famous dialogue from Star Wars, right? That when Darth Vader says, Luke, I am your father. So it turns out that was never the dialogue. It was always, no, I am your father. So just a lot of, again, there are a bunch of examples like these. For me personally, the Monopoly one really surprised me. But this is essentially, okay, this is another one I put in. Yeah, so again, one is right, one is wrong. So again, is it the one on the left? Is it the one on the right? And that is the correct one. So it turns out that, like, Pokemon's tail was always completely yellow. Even though a lot of us might remember the black at the end of the tail, it was never there. So this is essentially called the Mandela Effect. Maybe I've probably even spoken about it earlier at work too, because like I said, it is something that has always like really interested me. But essentially what this Mandela Effect is that it's when people collectively misremember something. So again, a large group of people independently just remember something differently altogether. And the reason it's called Mandela Effect is because apparently a bunch of people were convinced that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s. And they they remember seeing like a televised news coverage, and they remember seeing a funeral on TV and all of that. And this is, again, people around the world independently just have this memory. But turns out like he died in 2013 from like a respiratory tract infection. So which is why it's called the Mandela Effect, which is essentially a manifestation of false memory, which is essentially what like this talk will center around is false memory. I do think it's interesting because, like, again, I just think it's interesting as to, so again, false memory is pretty, again, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's basically when you vividly remember something that never happened. And I think it's interesting because like we put so much weight on memory, and like especially like maybe even like during the pandemic, right? We've probably like our nourishment has been memories. We've all been surviving and thriving and talking about memories, but just that they're given so much importance, yet like they can be like manipulated so easily. So I just think that's like an interesting like it's always been interesting to me. So yeah, so essentially memories are unreliable, right? And they can be molded, they can be changed, they can be completely manufactured. And I think a lot of us like think that memory is like it's like a recording device that, you know, it records information, and when you want to pull something up, you can just go, you know, you can like play it back and pull out whatever you want. But that's not, like, again, that's not how it works. Memories are actually very unreliable. And it's just, again, like, very often when we want to win an argument, or when like very often we win an argument with saying, but I remember it, or, you know, like, I clearly remember it, and no, like, I saw it, I remember it. So just, again, the amount of importance that we give to memories, and like I'm saying, like, you win arguments by saying, I remember it, I remember him saying this, and I clearly remember it, which, again, like, it's just, again, they're not as reliable as we think they are. And I think false memories are there everywhere. We probably like don't realize it, and they're probably more common than we think. We don't realize it because more often than not, I think they're inconsequential or they're harmless. So we don't really notice or care about them as much, and we dismiss false memories as mistakes. Or, you know, you simply say, oh, like, maybe I just misremembered it. You know, so just things like, I remember locking the front door, or, you know, like, I'm sure I turned the washing machine on, or like, I'm sure I put my phone on charging before I went to bed. So just simple things like these are also an example of false memory, again, because they seem harmless and don't really affect your life and seem inconsequential. So we don't actually realize how common they are. But that said, obviously, it's not, false memory does have larger implications as well. Uh, so again, so false memories are one of the leading reasons for false convictions. So again, this is not like an India-based statistic, but more so in countries like the US, where there's still a jury, and where there is, again, like, the whole thing for, again, why false convictions and false memories is because of like false eyewitness memory and false eyewitness testimony, which is why I'm saying it's more applicable to like countries like the US, where, again, like, historically, like, you know, for as long as we remember, like, an eyewitness testimony has always been one of the most like the stronger forms of evidence when it comes to criminal trials, right? Like an eyewitness testimony is one of the stronger evidences. And even if you see in like pop culture, right, like this whole, like, even when you see like, you know, like shows and movies where if it's like a courtroom and you have a witness in the stand, and if they point at the defendant and say, you know, like this is the person I saw, or if they essentially point at the defendant and say, this is the man I recognize, or whatever, that even that moment just becomes like an iconic moment. You know, just the testimony of this eyewitness becomes like over dramatized, and it becomes this important moment. So again, there's so much weight given to an eyewitness testimony, and again, like, the memory essentially of an eyewitness testimony, and like this whole thing of, like, I saw it with my own eyes, or, you know, how we always say that I'd only believe it when I like see it with my own eyes. So just, again, just this whole thing of how much we actually rely on our own perceptions and experiences, and like the whole, yeah, essentially. And it's just like, so again, so there was a study which was conducted by this psychologist called Elizabeth Loftus. And what she basically did, what, yeah, sorry. What she basically did is that she showed two groups of people the same video of a car accident. And after she showed them the video, she asked the first group, at what speed was the car, whatever, moving at when it hit the other car. And then she asked the second group the same question, except she changed the word hit to smash. So she asked one group, what speed was the car moving at when it hit the other car? And she asked the second group, what speed was the car moving at when it smashed into the other car. And even though both these groups saw the exact same video, when she said the word hit, people assumed that the car moved at a slower speed. And when she said the word smashed, they assumed that they said the car moved at a higher speed. Even though it's the same video, it's the same question. It's just the word hit triggered a different memory of it being a slower collision, and the word smash triggered a different memory of it being like a more intense collision. And just even, I think even like the group where the people who heard the word smashed, they also said they saw broken glass, which actually there wasn't any, but just the word smashed made convinced them that they'd also seen broken glass on the screen. So this is just so again, just an example of how even like tiny things like changing one word can actually just change your memory of an event. Another example where she again, the same psychologist, she took it up a notch, where she took participants and she basically told them that when you were a kid, you got lost in the shopping mall, and a stranger rescued you and took you back to your parents. And she tried to make it sound realistic, because she she asked the parents for like a mall that was near their house, or she chose a mall that existed that time and could be and like probably did exist where the participant lived when they were a kid. And and then the result essentially was that a lot of participants actually believed the story, and they actually believed that they'd gotten lost in a shopping mall when they were a kid. And a lot of them actually came back with more details. Like someone said that, oh yeah, like, I remember, and like I was whatever, like, it's like I was rescued in Dunkin' Donuts. Or someone said, oh yeah, I remember I was rescued by like an older woman. Someone said, yeah, like, just a lot of detail. Someone also said, I remember I was rescued by like someone wearing a red sweater. So just a lot of detail into something that never actually happened. So again, it was a tiny trigger, and people essentially just had these fully blown false memories, and they had these, again, like they invented details in this non-existent memory. Yeah, so this essentially showed how, again, you can basically literally implant completely false memories. So I think what she said was very interesting, because she said that memory kind of works a little bit like a Wikipedia page, right? So you can go in there and change it, but it's not just that. Others can also change it. So a lot of false memory comes from external suggestions. So even when you talk about like the criminal system, right? So even the way like people are interrogated can lead to like, like the way like a police interrogation, even the words used and the language used can lead to false testimony and also false confessions. Because sometimes people just end up believing that they actually did it, which actually leads to a lot of false confessions as well. So like an example would be, again, an example of how like language, again, or like how external suggestions can completely change your memory is, if supposing you ask someone like what shade of green was the bag. Now in the sentence itself, you've already kind of established that the bag is green. So you've already like placed that as the truth, right? You're not saying what color was the bag, you're saying what shade of green was the bag. So in that sentence itself, you're planting a memory that the bag was green. So again, things like that, or things like if you ask like someone like, were the robbers wearing black masks or red masks? And even though maybe the robbers were not wearing any masks, right? They were probably not wearing a mask, but just because you don't give an option of no mask, you just say, was it red or black? It confuses people and it alters their memory. So just again, how like I think just interesting as to even how one word or just how you frame sentences can alter your memory completely. And then again, and then like maybe I would just like maybe the whole oath thing then probably is again, does it actually, does it just become, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, or whatever it is you think you remember? Because I mean, what is the whole truth if it can be again, like I said, altered? um, but anyway, so that was a little bit more, like I said, maybe not so relevant directly to us. But if we were to talk about false memory, a little bit about like in our context or something that's probably closer to us or more relatable to us. So I think when we talk about memory, right, I think a very direct connection would be, of course, social media. You have Apple memories, you have Facebook memories, Snapchat memories, right? And I think uh, all of us basically essentially use social media to store and to document memories, right? And the reason, like a lot of us click pictures because we want to remember stuff, right? So like if we're traveling, we'll click 10 pictures because we want to be able to remember what the church looks like or what this street looks like, or if we eat something we like, we want to click a picture because we want to, again, we want to remember things. That is a like that is a large primary motivation for us to click pictures. Like very often you'll meet your friends and like sometimes we'll click a picture and I'll just say like it's an ugly picture or whatever, let's take another one. And then very often your friend will say, no, it's okay if it's ugly, it's anyway just for memories, I'm not like doing anything with it, it's okay, it's just for memories. So again, so like I'm saying, we click pictures because we essentially want to remember stuff, and we think that that's what pictures do, they help you relive memories and they help you remember things. But it's actually interesting because like research shows that it's the opposite. So those who documented and shared their experiences on social media actually formed less memories of those events. So again, like it's actually the opposite of what. So we all take pictures because we want to remember stuff, but it actually has the opposite effect on our memory. So again, the whole, and why that happens is because like the whole cliche, like whatever, like live in the moment and all of that, is actually what applies here. Because when you're, again, this is not an alien concept. Like we all know that when you're distracted by the camera and when you're distracted by pictures, you're obviously absorbing less. So while you have a so-called memory as a picture, you don't have it in your mind, right? And just this whole thing of that we're kind of like becoming almost too dependent on our smartphones to store memories. And it's like this thing of, again, like it's the whole, like it's called, like there's a thing called the Google effect, this whole thing of internal storage and external storage, right? So why don't we, like we used to remember phone numbers earlier, why don't we remember phone numbers anymore? Because we know that we can save it externally, right? And similarly, like we used to remember directions earlier, why don't we bother remembering directions anymore? Because again, we know there's like an external storage for it. And I think that's how we started treating memories in the same way. That we think that, so we think we have an external storage for memories, which is your smartphone and your social media. So you kind of, so again, you, it's like the phone numbers and like the Google Maps, you don't really bother remembering them as much. So this is a quote by, again, by this photographer for, I think, like for Wired magazine. And he said it isn't trustworthy simply because it's a picture, right? So again, the whole thing of pictures and memories being anonymous and us thinking that a picture is a direct translation of uh, a memory. It's um,
Nitika.
yeah. Can you please go on mute? Um, yeah. So essentially, the whole thing of memories and pictures are not, again, not synonymous, and it's not trustworthy simply because it's a picture, right? So very often when we talk about our childhood, like we pull out pictures or we pull out an album, when we tell stories, we think a picture, makes it more reliable. Or even when you have like important news stories, very often you think if you add a picture to it, it becomes more credible, right? So just the whole thing of how we think that pictures are basically capture the past reliably. And again, so research shows that we do give photographs a lot of credibility, even though we know that you can Photoshop them, and we know that photos can be fake. We all know editing softwares and all of that, but still, there is this kind of believability that is attached to photographs. But again, we are talking about false memory, so it will come back to that, which is that photographs again do have the power to distort memory as well. So this is again another experiment which was done. So essentially, it was the same. So they took the same concept as the whole lost in the mall experiment, and they adapted it for pictures. And they like for so in the study they basically showed people. So like you see, like from A, they took a kids, like they took a subject's picture. So like the top A, they took the person's picture. B, they took a hot air balloon and then they put it together. And they showed it to a bunch of people that when you were a kid, you went on a hot air balloon ride. And again, most participants again believed it. And similar to the lost in the shopping mall experiment, they started remembering details. They remembered the weather, and they remembered what they ate, or what they drank, and they just remembered all these vivid details, again, for like something that didn't happen. And then I think I was also reading, if you were to, for example, take this example and like whatever, mold it for today, for like the 21st century, and for social media, it's like if you spend hours like excessively scrolling through like the pictures of a certain party, okay, and you spend hours scrolling through pictures, and you see whatever, like X person dancing, right? So if you keep scrolling through these pictures, you may end up believing that you attended X person's dance. Like you saw this person dance, even though you went home at 9 p.m. Just because you keep scrolling through the pictures, you are likely to believe that you were also there and you saw the person dance. So just again, the more time we spend like looking or like imagining fictitious events, the more it forms as like a memory in our head. And then again, so this previous experiment established that clearly that doctored photos can doctor memories, right? So if you edit a photo, it can edit your memory. That's like the basic thing that the experiment basically told us, which is again also interesting for again today, because speaking about editing, that's what we all do, right? Like we all edit pictures, and I'm not even talking about like photoshopping or like heavy editing, but even like we might think it's like harmless to like make the water a little more blue, or make the sunset a little more pink, like whatever, like you might think it's harmless and what's the big deal. But it actually turns out that when we look back at these memories, we start remembering them through the pictures and through what we see on our feed. So if you have a picture, like if you upload a picture looking very happy at like a music festival, and then maybe like, so when you look back, you might remember that music festival as a happier event than it actually was. So there's a picture of you smiling widely. That's how you start remembering the music festival itself, right? So essentially what happens is, or if it's an overcast day and in your picture you've added a little bit of like sunshine, or like you've increased the brightness or whatever, when you look back you might just think it was a sunny day, right? So basically how even like small things like filters and editing can actually distort our memories, and we don't realize it, but like basically you alter your memories to to basically fit what you're seeing on the feed to some extent. And then again, another thing that how even social media likes can alter your memories. So again, there has been research about how like a happy event, and when they share a picture on social media, if they don't get enough likes, then that happy event suddenly becomes like a negative memory in their heads. And there are people, I think and I think people recognize this, they already know this, which is why like some people purposely don't share things on social media because they're worried about how it may affect the memory of it. So if you have a very cherished picture or a picture of, of a very cherished event or thing or situation or whatever, uh, there was this one study where some people said that we rather not share it on social media because we're just worried that if we that just like if we get lesser likes, or if it's not as whatever liked on social media, it could actually again turn a positive memory into a negative one. And again, last but not the least, I'm almost done, but just again, since again, to make it more relevant to us, we've spoken about false memory in like different aspects. I'm just going to talk a little bit about like false memories and advertising, and especially commercials, and how, which is why like if you see a lot of which is why a lot of brands often like you associate yourself with like certain memories or events, or like do you want to be associated with like like watching TV with your family at home, or just this whole thing of how like there's been studies of how well made and vivid commercials that elicit a certain memory can actually make people think that the scene they saw on TV is actually something that they themselves were a part of. So there was actually this study where they basically took this fictional popcorn, and there were two groups of people, and one group was essentially shown like these text heavy low imagery ads about the popcorn, and it spoke about the taste of the popcorn, but they were low imagery, more text, and they described the taste. The other group was shown like these high imagery commercials of happy people sitting in front of the TV and eating popcorn. And then independently from both of these, just separately, there was another third group that was made to try this popcorn. And then essentially what they did is like I think a few days later or a week later, they tested everyone's memory about the popcorn. And what was interesting is, so obviously the people who saw like the low imagery ads, they didn't really say that they had tried the popcorn. But those who watched the commercial, they were just as likely to have said that they had tried the popcorn as those who had actually tried the popcorn. So just by watching this well-made commercial of like a relatable scene of like sitting with your friends or family and having popcorn in front of the TV, so the people who saw that commercial were just as likely to have said that they had tried the popcorn as those who actually tried it. And then I think when these and then and then when these subjects were told that they hadn't, they just like again they were in denial. They were just so confident, like even when they were told that you haven't tried the popcorn, the only reason you're saying it is because you've seen a good ad. But even then, it's just that, which is what's probably more troubling, is that they were still confident that no, like we've tried the popcorn. So just again, an interesting thing of again the power of false memory, and again how easily your memory can be manipulated. And then just to like wrap up, just like a analogy that's probably again like relevant to us is like the save versus like the save as. And your memory is actually probably more like a save as, where it's essentially like rewritten every time you remember it. It's like a newer version, so it's lesser. It's not a save, it's not this thing that's just recorded once. It's more like a save as. And yes, that is essentially what I have, and it's just yeah, so essentially it was false memory, and I think I touched upon like a lot of like different things. There obviously there's a lot more research, a lot more studies. But yeah, that's what I have.